This is the Raising Rebellion podcast, episode number 9.
Welcome to the Raising Rebellion Parenting Podcast, where we will explore how to help kids seek purpose and passion, challenge society's expectations, and avoid a standardized life. Now here's your host, Paul H.K.
Hi, everyone, and thanks once again for being here. Today, I talked to one mom who is traveling the country with her 8-year-old daughter on a 4-month journey to raise awareness about homelessness. Her name is Jennifer Underwood. Now, I can already hear some people thinking, why would a parent take her 8-year-old daughter out across the country and go on tour talking and meeting with homeless people instead of the child being in a traditional classroom? And isn't that irresponsible of the parent to do something like that? But is it irresponsible? Or is she providing her daughter with an experience and perspective that most people will never have in their lifetime? I'll let you be the judge. Here's my interview with Jennifer. Today, I have the honor of talking to an incredible mom and human being, Jennifer Underwood. Jennifer, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, lots of great stuff to talk to you about. The first thing that I always ask my guests is to start at the very beginning. So would you mind telling me about your childhood, what it was like growing up, and maybe a bit about your journey in life to get to this point so far?
Sure. I didn't expect such a deep question right off the bat.
Sorry about that. I got to get to the root. I want to get to the root of where things come from.
That's okay.
Okay.
So I grew up actually in my parents got divorced when I was 5, and I was the oldest. I have a younger brother. Mm-hmm. And so we were, raised by a single mom. Mm-hmm. And pretty poor. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of always had to step up into a leadership role and be a bit of an adult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I always had to kind of help take care of my brother, and we did a lot of running around the neighborhood and hanging out, but I definitely wasn't traveling very much or involved in lots of sports or extracurricular type stuff. And then later on, I went to college. Mm-hmm. And I majored in English Lit, and then went back to college to get my master's in counseling. Mm-hmm. So somewhere in between those two, I had my daughter, mm-hmm. Who's now almost 9. Mm-hmm. And so I skipped around a lot during that time, not so much location-wise, some location-wise, but in a lot of different careers. I spent 5 years in real estate, and I worked on a cruise ship for a while. I was a chef. I did backstage rock and roll catering. I worked as a teacher for a couple years. I was a social worker for several years. That was my latest kind of 9-to-5 job. Mm-hmm. And I quit that 3 years ago and started my own company where I essentially sell things on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Quite the non-conventional path. So let me ask you a little bit about that. If your initial decision to go to college and then, subsequently after that to go get your master's, what do you think drove you to go do those things? Did you have any particular influence, or did you just feel like, that was something that you wanted to do at that time?
I don't think that I ever realized there was another option. Mm-hmm. particularly with my bachelor's degree, it never crossed my mind that I would not go to college. It was go to college and be successful, or don't go to college and don't be successful. Like there was no in between. No one in my life was doing anything non-traditional. And everyone in my life was struggling pretty much financially. So it was just kind of always assumed that I would go to college. I was the first person in my family since my great-grandmother to go to college, actually. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, after college and you had all your different, jobs that you did, what do you think took you from place to place? Was it, some sort of realization that you had at some point that just had you kind of searching for what it was that you wanted to do next as you were trying different things out and seeing how it went and kind of took you to the next step? Or what do you think?
I think I switched jobs kind of consistently because in each one I would find a challenge and get interested. And then I would kind of master it, and at least to a certain extent. And I would get frustrated with the requirements of the bureaucracy I was working within. And so I would change. I was just consistently looking for, like, there has to be something better in this. Like, I can't keep doing this for 40 years.
Right.
So there has to be something better.
Right. That's pretty great that you had that kind of realization that early that kept you moving from place to place. I like that. Okay, now I read on your website that you mentioned your latest 9-to-5 job was as a social worker, and there were a lot of aspects that you loved about it, but that your job was really stressful. Can you tell me a little bit about the stressful part? Was it, again, the bureaucracy part of it, or? It was toxic level stressful, unfortunately. The job, social work in general, I mean, anytime you're working for a nonprofit, it was underpaid. I was basically, even with a master's degree, was earning, poverty level wages in a city that's incredibly expensive, and was a single mom. And I loved my clients, but I also worked with the hardest population you can work with, just severely mentally ill, chronically addicted, severe medical problems, and chronically homeless adults. And I would move them into housing and then attempt to keep them there. But, I'm one person working with clients who are all need really a constant amount of attention. And I've got about 40 people on my caseload on average. Wow.
So we were really overworked, and then there was just a lot of trauma. Both holding space for our clients and the trauma that they go through and have gone through, and then ongoing trauma of working with clients who at any point in time can be dangerous. Getting assaulted was a real risk every day going into work. Finding one of my clients dead was a real risk every day as I went into work. So it was very much like emergency management style case management. And after 2.5 years of being really unsupported by the agency I was working for, and just being consistently traumatized and overworked and stressed out, it got to a point where it was like I felt like I had to leave because of my health.
Right. Totally understand that. Let's talk a little bit about the homeless, like your homeless clients in particular. Because that relates to, what you're doing now, which we'll get to in a minute, which I'm actually really excited to talk to you about. So, when I think about homeless today, I almost think it's like just sort of taken for granted these days, that the spotlight isn't on it as much as it used to be, and everybody's just kind of, accepting of it, and it's there, and there's, not going to go anywhere. Nobody's really doing anything about it. It's just an ongoing issue that will linger is kind of the vibe that I get, with regards to the homeless. Do you get that sense about what's going on with the homeless today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in society in general, I do get that sense. There's a certain amount of what we call compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Like you can only care a little bit, and then it's just like, can't deal with it anymore.
Right.
I feel like it's a really overwhelming issue, and there really hasn't been any movement. Federally, there was, I don't know, I want to say like 12 years ago, there was a plan put in place that was supposed to end homelessness in 10 years.
Yeah.
It hasn't.
Has it made any kind of progress at all, or?
No, not really.
No. Okay.
In a lot of areas of the country, homelessness is increasing rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, I think, been really frustrating for everyone, for people who don't know what's going on, for people who are working hard every day, trying to do something. It's one of those issues that no matter how much you work toward progress, it seems like no progress is ever made.
Right. Now, in your experience, how do people become homeless?
People become homeless for so many different reasons, but these days, so often it really is because of a series of financial setbacks. It's incredibly common for people to be living on Social Security and suddenly have their rent increase 3 times. And end up on the streets, or to be barely making it and then have, something happen where, let's say suddenly you're sick for 2 weeks, or your child is sick for 2 weeks, and you're a single mom and you don't get sick leave. You're out those 2 weeks of pay. And, now you're screwed, or your car breaks down and then something else happens, and it's one thing after another. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, all of those little things, like $80 at a time, makes it so that you fall into a hole that you can't climb out of.
Right.
And eventually you end up losing your housing. Medical issues, we hear that a lot as well. Where people will get sick. They get cancer, or they get a long-term disease, and they can't work, or they're having all of these medical bills, and they end up out on the streets.
Right. That's crazy. You also mentioned on your site that there are about 500,000 Americans that are homeless, and that about a quarter of them are children.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences? Can you tell me about any experiences you've had in working with homeless families and kids in particular?
Yeah, we actually, just yesterday, we're in Raleigh, North Carolina right now, and we're volunteering at a Sunday day program where they hand out food. And there was quite a few kids running around. They would come up and ask if they could get extra treats, or, they're playing with toys, they're hanging out with their parents, and the parents are asking if they can grab some extra stuff because school's starting this week and they got to figure out, how to send lunch stuff with them, have after school snacks, things like that.
Right.
And there was a lot of families out here who were in desperate need of, just food assistance.
So in talking with these families and just homeless people in general. I'm sure you're having conversations with some of these people as well. Have you had any kind of conversations that have had, a significant effect on what you're doing and maybe your perspective on homelessness at all? Or has you had any kind of like big revelations or impacts that you've had while doing this tour? And we'll talk about what your tour is exactly in just a minute.
Yeah, I think so. I worked with people who were homeless for years as a social worker, and so I felt like I had a pretty good idea coming into this, between that and my volunteer work since I left my job. But there was a couple of things that really surprised me so far, some themes that have been coming out in stories. And one of the biggest has been that everyone helps each other within the homeless community. People who are homeless tend to be the first people to try and give you anything, like even though they have nothing. Particularly like if I'm with my daughter and we're talking to someone. There was a couple in Boulder, Colorado, that we were talking to who were really insistent upon giving my daughter gifts. Wow. And we're trying to hand them socks that they need. Yeah. And they're rummaging around in their backpacks like, oh, here's a hacky sack. And one lady, her name is Christine, she had made friendship bracelets, and she had Rory pick one out and then quietly to me said, I really feel like she needs something material to remember this by. Wow. So, like those moments right there, and we see that a lot. You'll try to give something to someone and they're like, I don't really need it right now, but that guy over there, like he's hungry. Could you pass it on to him? That's one of the most beautiful themes that's come out of the stories that we've been receiving so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have seen videos, where people are doing these social experiment videos for YouTube or whatever, and there's like a hidden camera and somebody will walk up and, I just saw one just the other day, some guy who walked up to a homeless guy, or he was sleeping, and he left like $500, sitting there for when he woke up so he could see it. And he woke up, he saw the money, he got up, he went into Target and bought a bunch of stuff. And then the guy who was shooting the video, went back and sat down next to the homeless guy and was kind of talking loud on his phone and was saying something like, oh my, what are you talking about? That means that I don't have enough money to get medicine for my daughter this month. Don't you understand? And blah, blah, blah. And the homeless guy overheard it and starts, the guy hung up the phone and starts talking to the guy and is like, hey man, you okay? Everything all right? Total compassion for this guy, who just got off the phone, visibly upset. And he goes, could just hang here for 1 minute. I'll be right back. Would you mind watching my bag? He goes back to Target and returns everything that he had just bought with the money and comes back and gives money to this guy saying, hey, I'll be fine. You need money to get medicine for your daughter. And gives him the money. Returned everything he just bought and gave him back the money. And he didn't know that this was the guy that had given him the money in the first place, right?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is like that happens more than people think. One of the most powerful stories that I've heard so far was from a woman who runs an organization to help the homeless in Denver, Colorado, and her name's Amber. And Amber told me how her daughter, when she was 2, was diagnosed with leukemia. And within a week of that diagnosis, her husband said, you know what, I didn't sign up for this, and he left. And so she's left with, a very sick baby, and her husband's left her and his child, and she ends up living in Children's Hospital for about 2 years. She immediately quits her job, moves into the hospital with her daughter. and her daughter got better. But at the end of that, here she is trying to figure out how, where is she going to go? Like, they're about to get discharged, and Taylor's doing a lot better, but she's, still got a pretty fragile system. And it looked like they were going to end up on the streets because Amber hadn't worked in 2 years. And she'd lost pretty much her whole support system. And her dad, who's a minister and runs a homeless shelter, came in and he brought this guy with him. His name was Bear, who was a local homeless man in San Antonio. And they were talking about it, and she was like, I don't know what we're going to do, Dad. And he was like, we're going to find a way. Like, something's going to happen. We will find something. And 2 weeks later, I think, like a week or 2 weeks later, this guy, Bear, who had been homeless for years in the streets of San Antonio, came back to the hospital by himself and came looking. He found Amber, and he had a gigantic wad of cash with him. And he said, me and every other person in San Antonio have been panhandling for 2 weeks to get you enough money to get your first month's of rent for an apartment.
That's insane.
Like, we are not going to let you go homeless.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's just like, and those stories, they happen, and they happen so often. They're so beautiful. And yet, so often I think the only thing that we ever hear is the bad stories. People aren't really homeless, and they're just standing out there trying to get money,
right,
instead of really working, or
right,
all of these things like that.
Looking for handouts, for free handouts. And,
exactly.
Yeah, that's just crazy. Beautiful stories. But let's talk about what you're doing. You're on tour, and not the kind of tour that you would think about when you say you're on tour. Your tour is called the Just Say Hello Tour. Can you tell me about your tour and what you are doing?
Yes. So right now, my daughter and I are driving around the country. We've been on the road for about 7 or 8 weeks now, I think. And we are volunteering in homeless camps and shelters. We're talking to people who are out on the streets. We're collecting stories of homelessness and pairing them with photography and sharing them through social media in order to try and challenge people to kind of let some of these stories in and challenge their stigma around homelessness and their judgments and their misconceptions of, why people are homeless and, what keeps people on the streets and what they go through. And trying to encourage people to just say hello to those in their neighborhood and in their communities who are homeless.
So awesome. Now, let me ask you a little bit about your daughter. Has she done any volunteer work prior to you guys going on this tour at all?
She hasn't done much. The last couple years, I spent a fair amount of time volunteering with an organization in Seattle that kind of inspired me to do this tour. And they're called Facing Homelessness. And so she used to come into the office with me there and hang out and talk to people. And but in the last couple of years since she started school, she really hasn't done much volunteer work. So this is brand new for her.
Right. Now, are you homeschooling her while you're on tour? And then is the plan to, put her back into an actual brick and mortar school when you guys get back, or how's that working? So
we're doing online school. So it's kind of like a version of homeschool.
Yeah.
And we're going to see how this year goes. When I quit my job, my original goal was to get to a place where I could homeschool her and spend a lot of time traveling and volunteering. So I figure we're just going to kind of social experiment this for a year, and we'll see what happens.
Very cool. That's amazing. Okay, so what kinds of, I don't know, conversations have you had with your daughter since you started the tour? What kind of things has she seen, and maybe what kind of comments has she made to you? I'm sure it's got to be making an impact on her even to this point, yeah?
It does. And the whole thing has been not 100% of an easy transition, to tell you the truth.
Sure.
It was tough for her to conceptualize, going out and saying hi to people, and living in a van and driving around the country. And there was a fair amount of pushback from her on that, because it isn't anything that she's ever done before. It isn't anything she can understand. And since we've been out on the road, it's been kind of up and down. Like, there are times where she gets really into it. And just some really beautiful moments when, for example, when we were in Denver and she's been passing out, I think she passed out like 150 water bottles that day. And she comes running up to me at the end and she's like, "Mom, I think I broke my shyness." Like,
that's awesome.
Because she self-describes herself as being shy. She doesn't like to talk to people who are strangers. She really struggles with a fair amount of social anxiety. And so that was great. And then, shortly after that, it was like, "Oh, I don't want to do this. Like, this is the worst." Like 2 stops later or whatever, she had completely forgotten about that moment.
Right. But she's 8, right? So
yeah.
This is typical 8-year-old behavior.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then, we're, walking around on the streets of New York, and we find this guy, Donald, who was really sweet. He's sitting outside Macy's on 34th Street and on the sidewalk. And so we ended up just like sitting down on the sidewalk next to him, because it felt really weird to be standing up like above him, talking to him, right? And it was just really awesome to, we're both sitting on the sidewalk. People are milling around us. It's a busy street in New York, and just listening to this man's story. And there were he was very sweet, and his story was very touching. And he asked my daughter if it was okay if he smoked a cigarette, which she was very impressed by. She thought he had very good manners.
Yeah, totally.
And
very respectful.
Yeah, she was very impressed by that. And we walked away, and she pulled me aside after we were like around the corner. And she was like, and she held out her hand, and she had some change in it that she had dug out of her purse where she keeps her allowance. And she wanted to go back and give him her change, but she was afraid it wasn't going to be enough, and so we have these moments where I can see that she's, really getting it, and it's so beautiful. And it like pops through like rays of sunshine in between the, almost tween attitude that I get from her a lot of times.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I'm going to guess that, you probably might not see a lot of the impact that it's going to have on her until later, right? Until after the tour is over and she's growing older and she reflects back on it and she thinks about it. I mean, I think you're probably going to see a lot of delayed kind of impact as well, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one of those things, and it's interesting. It's a conversation we've had regularly with people, where it's like, well, if she doesn't really want to do it, like, why are you making her do it? And it's like, well, if I were to let her do exactly what she wanted to do all the time, life would look a lot different. And I really, there's all these lessons I really want to teach her about how being afraid to do something isn't reason to not do it. And, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is the only way to expand that comfort zone. anything that's different is going to be scary. Like there's all of this stuff that's involved in this, and I don't know if she'll pick up a lifelong lesson of service from it. That remains to be seen. But but I do think that she'll get quite a few lessons out of it, and in the end, it'll be a really good experience for her.
I think so. That's a great way to look at it too. I mean, you think as parents, we of course just want the best for our kids, right? We want to kind of insulate them, protect them from everything that we perceive to be as bad or whatever. But at the same time, it's almost counterintuitive to think that that's actually maybe not the best for them, right? Right. To expose them, we need to expose them to the realities of life. Otherwise, they're just not going to be better prepared. They can be better prepared if you're having the conversation, if you're having those experiences, right? And not, of course, you want to keep them safe, but I mean, you're just not completely shielding them from everything, because that's just impossible, first of all. And second of all, I think it helps broaden their perspective and make them more well-rounded people, I think. So. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. And, physical safety is clearly a very important key aspect to this. Sure. But, that's not an issue. Like, she's very safe. And, so it's just pushing her emotionally, while also it's been an interesting line to toe between, like, respecting her boundaries, and then also, like, getting her and kind of forcing her sometimes to push some of those boundaries. Right. Fantastic. I can't get over it. How great it is. Okay. Is there anything that you want to mention about your tour? I mean, first of all, of course, if people want to, anything that I haven't asked you about or anything you want to, talk about, let me know. And of course, if people who are listening, they want to find out more about what they can do to help you guys or to follow along, can you tell me all that stuff? Where should they go? What can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the tour is really, I get a lot of people asking, like, well, what's kind of the goal, or what's the point? And the tour is really like a social justice movement, just to try and get people involved, and really honestly to get people to start with, just as they walk through their own communities, making eye contact and saying hello. One of the things that we found is that people who are homeless feel really invisible, and they don't feel like they're even human anymore a lot of the times. And so I really feel like the way that we start addressing homelessness is that we all start actually seeing homelessness and kind of allow that in. And know that saying hello is enough. Like, you don't have to give money or, food or anything. That clearly, like, it's great if you, have an extra pair of socks and you want to donate it to someone, or, some food or anything like that. But just saying hello to people is really an amazing gift, just to see them. So that is what we are trying to spread. And we're doing that through stories, and those stories can be found on Facebook and Instagram at the Just Say Hello Tour. And then you can find us on Twitter at Say Hello Tour, and on our website at www.justsayhellotour.com. And we are really challenging America to go out and actually say hello to people. So we would love it if people have stories that they want to send us through email, through Facebook, or just tag us in social media on any of those sites with the hashtag Just Say Hello Tour, and tell us how you are saying hello to people in your community.
That's fantastic. I thought about when you were talking, I almost feel like people, they don't want to make eye contact or they don't want to say hello because they feel like if they do that and they get a response back from a homeless person that they might feel obligated to give them money or something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there is, I think a lot of things come into play. I think a lot of it is like guilt and fear.
Yeah.
And there are certainly times, right? Like there are times where you're going to be walking past someone and you say hi and they are hostile.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I really try to tell people is, in those moments, like what's going on, it's never about you, right? So you've done the best that you can and you can still feel good about that. If that person wasn't in a place to receive it, it's probably because maybe they haven't slept in 3 days, or they're tired and they're hungry. And we actually had a conversation with a woman named Bridget in Indianapolis who she's known in the community to be just like a lovely human and had been really cranky for the last couple of days before we got there. Like people that we were going out with were like, oh, I don't know if she might yell. And I was like, that's okay if she does, right? Like, I'm not going to take it personally, but she didn't yell. And in fact, she kind of immediately was like, she's like, people don't understand why I'm yelling at them to have a bad day. It's because I need someone to have a bad day so I can have a decent one. Like I haven't slept in 5 days and I'm hungry and I'm exhausted and I'm tired and I'm sitting here on the side of the street and no one's even looking at me. And I just think, like there are times where I know I haven't eaten in a little bit and I'm tired and I'm cranky.
Absolutely. You can ask my daughter about that. Sure.
Totally. Right. We're like, that's like the smallest little thing. And I'm like, bah! And so like, I just think like, I can see that and like have empathy, like I don't have to take that on. Right. So if I say hi to someone and they're like, screw you, where's my money?
Right.
I'm like, it's okay, man. But like, have a good day. Like, I hope things get better. I can keep walking. Or, I mean, I have a background and skills and there are times where I'll stop and actually try to be like, hey man, is there actually like anything I can help you with? Like, I'm not your enemy. I'm really actually honestly trying to help right now.
Right.
And, but a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that and that's fine as well, but you don't have to take it on. You can just know that person's having a bad day and they're cranky. They probably still appreciated it.
Right.
And they'll probably look back and be like, man, I shouldn't have snapped at that person.
Right. Well, I mean, it reminds me of one other thing that I read on your site. And I know, I'm watching the clock here because I know, I want to be respectful of your time, but I know, you have things to do as well. But I read one thing on your site where you were talking about how, as you were thinking about doing this trip and starting to put it out there and tell people about it and getting their feedback and how it was kind of stressing you out, but you had everybody supporting you and patting you on the back and saying, oh, it's what an inspirational thing you're doing and such a great thing you're doing. But you took the perspective of, well, yeah, this is, something I'm doing to help raise awareness, but think about what these people go through on a daily basis.
Yeah, it makes me really uncomfortable when people like set me up like some kind of hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, because like I'm not like, and I don't want to undervalue the fact that like, certainly what we're doing is kind of a big deal as far as most people don't take 4 months to volunteer their time and do something like this, but it's also just 4 months and I'm not really put out during it and it's something that I love doing. But every day we walk by people on the streets who are suffering. I mean, really, really, truly suffering and continuing to show up and fight. in one way or another. Maybe it's literally just sitting on the side of the road that day, but they're not giving up. And instead of seeing them as like, wow, that's really amazing that you continue to show up, we see them as like, why aren't you doing more?
Right.
Or like, why can't you pull yourself together? Why don't you just go get a job? That's actually something that people who are homeless get yelled at a lot. They get those words yelled at them a lot. And it kind of blows my mind. I think it's possible to start to shift perspective. And that is what we're trying to do. It's possible to see someone on the street and see the human and see the beauty in that person, and to see the resilience in that person, that they're even showing up under all of that stress and that pain and that struggle. And I really do think that in a lot of ways, like, they are like the stories that I'm telling, the people that I'm meeting, like, they're the real heroes. And they're the people who need to be admired, because it's really amazing what they're able to go through.
Yep. Fantastic. Okay, let me ask you one final question, if I may.
Okay.
This is a question I ask of everybody. It's the last question I ask everybody. This podcast is called Raising Rebellion, where I refer to the rebellion being not just simply throwing our kids through the expected system and the societal system of school, job, career, but rather helping them and their perspective by seeking out and doing meaningful things, that they may want to do in life later. So with that in mind, what advice could you give to anybody that might be listening on how to become a successful rebel in life?
I think there are a couple things. The biggest is probably to know that everything is scary for everyone, and that you cannot wait until you're not scared, or you have enough money, or you have enough time, because those things will just never happen.
Yeah.
So it really, like, life is about showing up, like, day to day, even when you're scared and when you're tired and when you don't have enough money and time, and finding ways to take those steps. And it's not an all or nothing thing. And it's not a, one moment you're here and the next you're, changing lives, or, have this amazing offbeat career. Like, it's hard work. And as far as, like, raising children, in that way, I think one of the most important things that I try to do with kids these days is I never ask them what they want to be. I always ask them what problem they want to fix. I think that we really need to shift our perspective with our kids, and start encouraging them. I mean, we tell them you can be anything you want to be, but we don't really tell them they can do anything that they want to do, or they can fix any problem they want to fix. I never really knew that people could have success on an unconventional path. And one of my greatest hopes for my daughter is that she grows up knowing that, and not having to find that out later on in life.
Me too. And that's a big reason for the podcast. So thank you very much. That was beautiful. Your selflessness and your service, not just, with you and your daughter doing this tour, but just with your background, your social work, your volunteering, your history is it is, I know you might not like it, but it is inspirational, and I think it does. I think it does touch people, and I think it does help people think a different way. really, which is why you're doing it. So really thank you for what you do and for putting that back into the world. I think you're giving your daughter an amazing experience. Now, I know that you will be in Southern California in October when you are on that part of your tour.
Yes.
So I'm here in Los Angeles, so I would very much like to keep in contact so that when, you are on your way, we can connect when you're here, and I would love to go out and help you volunteer with you guys, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay, that would be awesome, and, we can... maybe we can get our kids together and they can meet each other, which I think would be amazing as well. So let's definitely just keep in touch on your journey and then touch base when you get here to SoCal.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the opportunity to help spread the word about what you're doing. So, I wish you and your daughter nothing but safe travels, and we will talk very soon.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Okay, bye. A big thank you to Jennifer and her daughter for taking the time out of their tour to chat with me. Our website is raisingrebellion.com, where you can find all of our podcast episodes and show information. If you sign up for our mailing list on the site, you'll get some extra tips and thoughts for Rebel parents in our update emails. If you're enjoying our podcast, I'd really appreciate you subscribing and or leaving a review on iTunes. But most of all, I hope you find this podcast helpful, and I truly appreciate you being here. So until next time, go Rebs.